Here on the front page, the country's fiscal commissioner, Fayval Williams, says there's no need to panic about the country's tax shortfall at the end of the last fiscal year. Williams says there's been an uptick in revenue collections over the last few months, which should go some way to offsetting the shortfall.
This is not a situation to panic, right? So there was a revenue shortfall in the last quarter of 24-25, just about $14 billion. And there was also a shortfall of a smaller magnitude, just about $1.5 billion in the first quarter of this fiscal year. Now, if you're going to have a shortfall, it's better to have that shortfall early in the year so that the government can take corrective action to actually bring things back on track. So within that context, I'm saying it's not a situation to panic at this time, but it's something that's worthy of looking deeply at it.
Fayval Williams, in its latest statement on fiscal performance, the Independent Fiscal Commission, the IFC, flagged a $14 billion tax shortfall at the end of the last fiscal year. This resulted in an overstating of the revenue base for 2025-26. The IFC cautioned that additional revenue may be needed to meet budgeted targets.
Williams says there's been a 6% improvement in revenue collection since the period covered by the report. But he warns that without adjustments to expenditure at minimum, a 9% rise in revenues is required. It's the kind of expansion in revenue collection that has rarely been seen in Jamaica's history.
For the period September through March of next year, when the fiscal year ends, the revenue collection, tax revenue, would have to increase by about 9.5%. And we have not seen that level of increase for the past 3 or so years. In fact, when we look at the past 10 years, excluding the COVID period, and I want to exclude that period because it was extraordinary, it would have been only three years where we saw tax revenue increasing by over 9% in the September to March period. So for most of those years, tax revenue did not increase by as much as the 9.5%, which is what would be required over the 7-month period from September through to March for it to come in line with target. So there's still a concern that the target for the revenue could still be missed.
That's Fayval Williams, the country's fiscal commissioner. Well, to discuss this further, we're joined by the Minister of Finance and Public Service, Fayval Williams. Good morning, Minister Williams.
Hi, good morning. I have to say to you, though, that the reception on this is not sounding so good. I don't know if you're hearing me well.
We are hearing you loud and clear, perfectly fine on our end. Can you hear us?
All right.
Can you hear us, Minister?
I can hear you with some difficulty.
Oh, okay, Minister. Well, we'll try to do our best to get through the matter. So, Minister, the information provided by the Fiscal Commissioner might be a bit out of date. What is the latest from the Ministry of Finance in terms of our revenue targets?
Sure. I'll get to that, but I first want to say, as I was waiting online here and listening to the news about Jaden, that 12-year-old from Manchester High, I want to join in the appeal for a safe return. I heard Principal Jasper Gabriel this morning on radio, and I got to know him during my time at the Ministry of Education, and you could hear the pain in his voice. I know Jamaicans are caring people, and having been alerted to the fact that Jaden is missing, everybody will be on the lookout for him, and so we pray for his safety and safe return.
I appreciate that appeal, Minister.
Right. So to your question now in terms of the Independent Fiscal Commission's report, as you know, we follow the numbers very closely. And when we look at the April to August of this fiscal year, tax revenues are ahead by some $7.6 billion, ahead of our projections. So we're making up ground. As you will recall, in the last fiscal year, we suffered the devastation of Beryl and Raphael in short order, one behind the other, and that would have impacted our GDP growth for the full year. That was negative last year, all told, negative 0.7%. I'm sure you've seen the projections from the PIOJ and latest from the Bank of Jamaica, where we're looking at anywhere between 2 to 4% for this fiscal year. So far, we've come through our normal weather period with minimal damage relative to last year. And so we will continue to go through. We have good factors going for us. Unemployment is at decades low. We have good inflation environment. We're not seeing significant impact from the geopolitical issues that have been swirling around. So we're in a good place right now, in a recovery relative to last year, and we are looking to add to that.
So is there an expectation that you will meet the revenue targets come the end of the fiscal year? And would you be able to meet those revenue targets without cutting anything in terms of expenditure?
So we are expecting to meet the targets. I'm sorry, there's somebody else speaking that I'm hearing in the phone. I don't know. We're expecting, obviously we are working to ensure that we do. Our major revenue collection agents are Tax Administration, Jamaica, Customs, and obviously we also look to the public bodies for how well they are doing and what can be collected from them as well. Again, we are almost at the end of that period, of that weather-related period, and we're heading into Christmas, and by all indications, we should have a good Christmas season with quite a bit of demand for entertainment and all the goods and services that go with that. And we will continue to monitor the numbers as we go along.
Minister, stay with us. We're up on a break, please.
We're speaking to the country's Minister of Finance, Fayval Williams, based on what the Independent Fiscal Commission, the IFC, has said. They have noted that there's a $14 billion tax shortfall at the end of the last fiscal year, which led to an overstating of the revenue base for 2025-2026. Minister, you're there with us?
Sorry. Yes, I'm still here. Sorry.
Okay, so
I don't know if you asked any questions.
No, I was just recapping. I was recapping for our listeners to understand.
And just so listeners know, I'm not in the country at the moment.
Right.
I'm attending the anti-money laundering conference in Panama.
Nice.
Important activity.
Right.
For Jamaica to keep up with and be part of.
Indeed. So, Minister, tell us, you said to Siobhan earlier that you believe that you'll be on target end of fiscal year. But what if we are not? What happens then?
So, it is important that we continue to monitor the budget to see how the revenue numbers are coming in, but also to monitor the expenditure side. And as you can imagine, all across government, central government, public bodies, there's a lot of activity going on. We look at the projects to see where they are relative to expectation, relative to where entities say they would be. So we know projects that are lagging, projects that are ahead, projects that are, just on target. Because things happen, as you heard the commissioner said, on large projects, you could have delays and so forth. So there's a monitoring that goes on that helps us to pull the levers, if you will, in terms of all the various projects out there. So if a project is not going as well as it should and funds are allocated to that project, then you may pull back relative to where the project is, and that could be allocated to something else that requires some funding. So there is very active monitoring of all the projects, the procurement, all of that across the government to see where we are, to ensure that when we report at the end of the fiscal year that the targets, the important targets that we have to meet, that those will be met.
So in other words, Minister, projects that are lagging behind or seem to have some difficulties, monies could be reallocated from those to make up for revenue shortfall?
Well, you can reallocate from those to others if others are ahead of their target. That's the example that I'm using here now. But what I want to convey is that the government's budget is actively monitored relative to targets, so that we do not miss the important ones already. If we look at the debt to GDP, we are 2 years ahead of where we said we would be. We monitor the fiscal balance very closely because we have to ensure that we have a primary balance that's at least 3% or so of GDP. But as we move forward now, we are going to have to recalibrate because we're entering into a new period where we will have met the important target of the debt to GDP. So we have to begin to set new targets for the next 3 to 5 years.
And I'd love to discuss that matter of the adjustments to the primary surplus, Minister. But before we get to that, there's still the matter of the expenditure, because I'm happy that you brought it up, because that seems to be the solution over the last few fiscal years.
Chevron, I'm not hearing you clearly.
Can you hear me now, Minister?
No, I can.
Okay. Well, it seems to be that when these matter of revenue shortfalls happen, we can almost count on the fact that there are projects in the capital expenditure that either will not meet their completion date in time or have fallen off for other reasons. As the fiscal commissioner pointed out, for the fiscal year so far, we're $20 billion behind in terms of capital expenditure. Is there a concern in government that this seems to be happening almost routinely year on year, where we under-expend in terms of capital expenditure?
So as you can imagine, capital spending requires there to be calibration, among a number of activities. So take one that we understand: road construction, major road construction. In my own constituency, let's say with the spark allocation that has been done for that constituency, I would have expected certain roads to have been finished by now, but they are just starting, because we have one major road agency that has to manage all the projects across Jamaica, and sometimes we do have rain. We have flooding. We have delays in procurement, or delays in shipping. Any number of things can happen, as we try to execute these projects. But again, it's our duty to look across the portfolio of projects to ensure that the ones that are moving are adequately funded, to understand the issues with those that are not, and to continue to move things along that way.
And I appreciate that, Minister, that the budget, it's not static, it's a very dynamic document, even though some people think it might be set in stone. But as the Fiscal Commissioner raised a concern, are we being overly ambitious in terms of our capital expenditure sometimes, in terms of what we anticipate will be possible versus the capacity to get it done?
All right, so you talk about capacity issues across the government. Yes, this is a concern, and so you would have seen the Prime Minister appoint Minister Marks to look at efficiency across government to see what are some of the roadblocks in the way. Is it the approval process? Is it the procurement process? Is it a combination of all of the above? How can we improve the throughput of government, not just on the capital side, but also on the operating side? And that's a project that I know Minister Marks has taken on with gusto, and we are all committed to working with her to ensure that the throughput of government happens in a timely way, on behalf of all of us in Jamaica, because if it doesn't, then it holds back our GDP growth, and that is something that we would like to see accelerate as we go forward.
But Minister, you'll appreciate, as I ask this question, Senator Albin Hill, Minister of Industry, Investment, Commerce, said, the procurement laws were drafted as if, everyone is a thief. Recently as well, the fiscal commissioner said that procurement is being blamed. We hear the police commissioner saying, as it relates to body-worn cameras, procurement is holding that up. It seems to be a common thread when it comes to getting things done with the capital budget or whatever, to say that it is a procurement issue. What is your response to that? Do you agree with it?
The Procurement Act resides at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, and I'm pleased to note that we have made amendments to the Act that will allow us to begin to see progress. So we did a thorough review of the Act, and we've increased thresholds. So up to a certain level, you can get the authorization, at one level, up to a certain amount in terms of dollars, and authorization at that level. So thresholds have increased. That's an important feature, because everything, had to go up the ladder prior to that. So that is one thing that should improve the throughput in government, but those changes just recently happened, and we'll see the impact of that as we go forward. Additionally, the amendments allow for better streamlining of emergency procurement as well. If you recall, like last year when we had Beryl and schools were devastated, it took us a little while to just work through what we needed to do there in terms of emergency procurement. And coming out of that experience, we've ensured that the amendments reflect true situations of emergencies, so persons can act quickly in those scenarios. So, and we will continue to look at the Procurement Act as we measure that against the experience we're having, to make sure that we have laws that are fit for purpose.
And Minister, now turning to the matter of the primary surplus target and the recalibration of the budget, as you said, we're 2 years ahead of schedule, which means we should hit the 60% mark at the end of this fiscal year. What does that mean in terms of adjustments to that primary surplus target, and what does that mean for Jamaicans?
So it is good news for Jamaica that we are at the 60% target, at or close to the 60%, even two years ahead of that. It allows us to make new decisions about where we'd love to be in the next 5 years. You would have seen a recent upgrade by Standard & Poor's, the international rating agency, which gets us closer to getting out of the category called below investment grade. We're that much closer to being an investment grade country. And what that means is that new avenues of capital will be opened up to us as a country when we get into that investment grade category, which is a goal that we have. So Saeed, and Siobhan, things are aligning. All the major work that has happened over the last decade or so, it's coming to fruition. You can see the amount of time it has taken to get here, but the important thing is the steadfastness with which we have worked to get where we are today, and the commitment that we have to fiscal discipline going forward, but also continuing to lay on that the environment for accelerated GDP growth.
Well, certainly we expect the continued monitoring, and of course you'll speak again as the news comes out concerning that. But Minister, before you go, any highlights, big news coming from your anti-money laundering conference there in Panama?
Syed, I am sorry about the connection, but I did not catch.
Are you hearing me any better?
Yes.
Okay, I was asking if there's any big news or highlights coming from your conference there on anti-money laundering in Panama.
Well, the highlight is that as Caribbean countries, and the anti-money laundering conference is for Caribbean nations, we came together 32 years ago and formed this entity called CFATF, Caribbean Financial Action Task Force. And as a group of countries, we have worked steadfastly to ensure that our financial network in the region remains at the level that our international partners consider it to be good and safe. You know, we are linked into the global world, and it's important for us to abide by good practices in our financial sector. You would have seen across the Caribbean, Jamaica as an example, we were blacklisted and grey listed, and we had to do a lot to get off of those listings, a lot in terms of making changes to our legislation, ensuring that we're not an avenue for money laundering in the Caribbean or the wider global network. We're pleased to note that we have come off of both those lists, and we continue to work steadfastly to ensure that our financial sector is not the place that anyone considers that they can come to engage in money laundering.
Very well, Minister. Well, be safe over there, and looking forward to further news from you from that conference. Yeah, that... Okay.
Since we lost the minister,
Yeah.
well,
I'm still on, but I'm just having a problem here.
Oh, I was just wishing you all the
Yeah,
best, Minister,
so
and say that we are looking forward to further news from you when you return from that conference, yes?
All right, great.
Very
Well, I'll do that. I'll definitely, bring back a more fulsome summary of this conference
Indeed.
here in Panama. Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks for joining us.